Imagine you have $10 in your piggy bank. You go to the store, and that $10 buys you a pizza. You come back next year with the same $10, but now that pizza costs $12. Your money didn't disappear, but somehow it became weaker. This isn't magic, it's inflation, and it's happening to your money right now while you're watching this video. In 1971, a McDonald's hamburger cost 25 cents. Today, that same hamburger costs $3.49. That's a 1,296% increase. Your grandparents weren't lying when they said things were cheaper back then. They literally were. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Inflation isn't some natural disaster that just happens to money. It's created by people on purpose. And today, you're going to understand exactly how this works, why it exists, and why every single person with money should care about it. Because by the end of this video, you'll never look at your savings account the same way again. Let's start with something simple. You're throwing a birthday party. You've got 10 kids coming and you baked exactly 10 cupcakes. Perfect. Everyone gets one cupcake, everyone's happy, but then 5 more kids show up unexpectedly. Now you have 15 kids and still only 10 cupcakes. What happens? The kids start competing for cupcakes. Maybe they offer to trade their toys. Maybe they promise to do chores. The value of each cupcake just went up because there's more demand than supply. This is inflation in its purest form. More demand, same supply, higher prices. Now let's flip it. Same party, but this time you're paranoid about running out of cupcakes, so you bake 50 of them. You've got 10 kids and 50 cupcakes. What happens to the value of each cupcake? It plummets. Kids are taking 3-4 cupcakes each. Nobody cares about cupcakes anymore because there's so many of them. This is deflation. Too much supply, same demand, lower prices. But here's where it gets interesting. In this cupcake economy, you're not just the party host. You're also the central bank. And instead of cupcakes, you control money. Money isn't gold bars sitting in a vault somewhere. In 2024, only about 8% of all money exists as physical cash. The other 92% is just numbers and computers, digital entries. And here's the scary part. Creating new money is as simple as typing bigger numbers into a computer. When the government needs money, they don't empty their savings account. They create it. The Federal Reserve, which is America's central bank, has the power to create new dollars out of thin air. They don't need permission. They don't need to mine gold. They just make more money. In 2020, during the pandemic, the US printed more money in a single year than they had printed in the previous 2 centuries combined. 20% of all dollars that have ever existed were created in 2020. Let that sink in. 1 in $5 in existence was born in a single year. It's like someone showed up to your cupcake party with 50 more cupcakes they baked in their kitchen 5 minutes ago. Suddenly, your original cupcakes aren't so special anymore. But why would anyone do this? Why would a government deliberately make their own money worth less? Here's something that might surprise you. Governments want inflation. They aim for it. The Federal Reserve has an official target of 2% inflation per year. That means they actively try to make your money lose 2% of its value every single year. Why? Because the alternative is worse. Remember our deflation cupcake scenario? When there's too much supply and prices fall, people stop spending money. Why buy something today if it'll be cheaper tomorrow? This creates a deflationary spiral. Businesses make less money. They lay off workers. Unemployment rises. People spend even less money, and the whole economy grinds to a halt. Japan experienced this in the 1990s. Prices kept falling. People kept waiting for better deals, and their economy was basically frozen for an entire decade. They called it the lost decade. So central banks learned that a little bit of inflation is like economic WD-40. It keeps the gears moving. When prices rise slowly and predictably, people buy things now instead of waiting. Businesses invest in growth because they know they can charge more next year. Workers demand raises to keep up with rising costs. 2% inflation means your money loses half its value every 35 years. Your parents could buy twice as much stuff with their dollars when you were born. Your kids will need twice as much money to buy the same stuff when they're your age. This isn't a bug in the system, it's the feature. Let's do some math that'll make you uncomfortable. The average savings account in America pays 0.45% interest per year. Inflation has averaged 3.2% per year over the past decade. That means your savings account is losing 75% of its purchasing power every year. Put $10,000 in a savings account today. In 10 years, you'll have $10,460 in the account. But because of inflation, you'll need $13,790 to buy the same stuff that $10,000 bought today. You just lost $3,330 in purchasing power by being responsible and saving your money. This is why your grandmother could buy a house for $12,000 in 1960, but that same house costs $300,000 today. The house didn't become 25 times better. The money became 25 times weaker. Banks love this arrangement. They borrow your money at 0.45% interest, then lend it out at 7% for mortgages and 22% for credit cards. Meanwhile, inflation eats away at the real value of what they owe you. You're essentially paying them to hold your money while it loses value. But here's what's really twisted. This isn't an accident. The system is designed this way. Central banks want you to take your money out of savings and either spend it or invest it in riskier assets. They want to force you up the risk ladder. Safe equals poor. That's the message. Now we get to the part that makes people angry. Inflation doesn't affect everyone equally. It's regressive, which means it hurts poor people more than rich people. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, spending 100% of your income on necessities like rent, food, and gas, then inflation directly reduces your standard of living. When groceries cost 10% more, you have 10% less money for everything else. But if you're wealthy and own assets like stocks, real estate, and businesses, inflation actually makes you richer. When the money supply increases, asset prices rise faster than consumer prices. Your house becomes more valuable. Your stocks go up. Your business can charge more for its products. The wealthy don't keep their money in savings accounts. They buy things that inflate stocks, real estate, commodities, businesses. When new money enters the system, it flows to assets first, then trickles down to consumer prices later. Asset owners get rich first, then everyone else gets higher prices. This is called the Cantillon effect, named after an 18th century economist who noticed that those closest to the money printer benefit most. In 2020 and 2021, billionaires gained $2.4 trillion in wealth, while regular people dealt with 9% inflation on groceries and rent. It's like someone keeps adding more and more kids to the cupcake party, but they give the extra cupcakes to the kids who already have the most cupcakes. Then they act surprised when the kids with no cupcakes get angry. The government tells you inflation is under control. They publish official numbers showing inflation at 3% or 4%. But go to a grocery store, ask someone paying rent, look at college tuition costs or healthcare premiums. Does 3% feel accurate? That's because official inflation calculations use something called hedonic adjustments and substitution effects. Sounds fancy, but it's basically creative accounting. Hedonic adjustment means if your car costs 10% more but has slightly better technology, they adjust the inflation calculation downward because you're getting more value. Your smartphone costs the same as last year but has a better camera. That's counted as deflation because you got a better phone for the same price. Substitution effect means if steak gets too expensive and people switch to chicken, they adjust the calculation as if chicken was what people wanted all along. Your standard of living declined, but statistically, there's no inflation because people adapted. They also exclude housing costs for homeowners using something called owner's equivalent rent instead of actual home prices. Home prices doubled in many cities, but official inflation barely noticed because they use a complex calculation about theoretical rent that homeowners might pay themselves. The result, official inflation numbers that are systematically lower than what people actually experience. Real inflation, the kind that affects your daily life, is often 2 to 3 times higher than official statistics suggest. Most of the time, inflation moves slowly. 2% per year is barely noticeable, day to day. But sometimes things go completely insane. Germany in 1923, inflation reached 29,500% per month. A loaf of bread that cost 1 mark in 1922 cost 100 billion marks by November 1923. Workers were paid twice a day because their wages became worthless between morning and evening. People brought wheelbarrows full of cash to buy groceries. Zimbabwe, in 2008, inflation hit 231 million% per year. The government printed a $100 trillion banknote that couldn't buy a candy bar. People abandoned their currency entirely and started using US dollars and South African rand instead. Venezuela right now, inflation peaked at over 1 million% per year in 2018. Doctors became Uber drivers because driving paid better than medicine. People lost 90% of their life savings in 5 years. What caused these disasters? The same thing every time. Governments printed massive amounts of money to pay their bills. Too much money, same amount of goods prices explode. The scary part. Every government that experienced hyperinflation thought they were different. They thought they could print their way out of problems without consequences. They all had sophisticated economists explaining why their situation was unique, right up until it wasn't. So what do? How do you protect yourself when your own government is systematically devaluing your money? First, to understand that cash is not a long-term store of value. It's a medium of exchange. Keep enough cash for emergencies and monthly expenses, but don't let large amounts sit in savings accounts getting inflated away. Second, own assets that benefit from inflation. Real estate historically keeps pace with inflation because rent and property values rise with the general price level. Stocks represent ownership in businesses, and businesses can raise their prices when costs increase. Some people buy gold, silver, or cryptocurrency as inflation hedges, though these can be volatile and don't always correlate perfectly with inflation. Third, if you have debt with fixed interest rates, inflation actually helps you. If you have a 30-year mortgage at 4% interest and inflation runs at 5%, you're essentially being paid to borrow money. You pay back the loan with dollars that are worth less than the dollars you borrowed. Fourth, invest in yourself. Skills, education, and relationships become more valuable over time. No one can inflate away your ability to create value for other people. The most important thing is to stop thinking of money as a stable store of value. It isn't. It never was. It's a tool that's constantly changing, and the rules of that change are controlled by people with different incentives than you. So, there you have it. Inflation isn't some mysterious economic force that just happens. It's a deliberate policy tool used by governments to manage their economies. And whether you understand it or not, it's happening to your money every single day. Your $10,000 in savings will buy $9,800 worth of stuff next year if inflation runs at 2%. It'll buy $9,600 worth of stuff the year after that. Every year you wait to understand this, you lose more purchasing power. But here's the really crazy part. We've been talking about normal inflation, the kind central banks target and control. What happens when that control breaks down? What happens when inflation stops being a tool and becomes a weapon? Well, that's a story for another video. A story about currency wars, digital money, and why some very smart people think we're heading for the biggest monetary experiment in human history. But for now, go check your savings account balance. Look at that number. And remember, that's not how much money you have. That's how much money you have today. Tomorrow, it'll be a little bit less. And the day after that, a little bit less again. The money melting machine never sleeps.